Welcome to Champion Stepdad Podcast. We are exploring the unique role of stepdads and how to apply performance psychology skills to become better father figures and role models. My name is Neil Wattier. I'm a stepdad. I'm also a resilience trainer and a performance consultant, encouraging you to join the Champion Stepdad Facebook group and grow your band of brothers. Today, I'm talking to Chris Kilworth. Chris is the host of Between the Mountains podcast, and the conversation centers on how you can connect with your children through adventure. And although he talks about climbing mountains and taking his daughter on these short but challenging for her level mountain climbing adventures, the idea is adventure means different things to different people. It could be climbing a mountain. It could be taking a cross-country trip, or it could be popping a tent in your backyard and camping out under the stars. Connection has many forms. And if you want to connect with your children, if you want to connect with your stepchildren, there has to be something of substance. It can't just be this father-son, father-daughter relationship. If you want to talk about being a father figure and being a mentor, there needs to be something that builds the connection. So what are you doing to proactively create and encourage this relationship? Sometimes it's meet them where they are and do what they want to do, to play board games or to play video games or to go outside and throw the ball around or to go for a walk. Other times it could be bringing them into your interests. I started bringing the boys into the garage and working on the camper with me, or working on a car. I haven't started working with them on my cars yet, but my older children are very knowledgeable. They're not mechanics, but they can handle their own vehicle. I got a call from my daughter a week or two ago, and she was asking me, hey, I remember there's a trick to getting oil off the driveway, but what is it? And she was in the middle of doing her oil, doing a couple fluids and changing her brakes. And although she had somebody there helping her, she was the one that was doing the work. They were just helping her out. And it was very satisfying to hear that she's still actively involved in doing these things. And so having these relationships, building these relationships with my young stepsons is encouraged through meeting them where they are and doing what they love to do while trying to open their eyes to other things. And sometimes it hits and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it is a father-son relationship, and you've got to lay down the law and say, you know what, no, this is what we're doing. And it may not be as much fun as it is a chore. And that's okay, as long as the intent is to build a relationship, to expose them to new things and allow them the opportunity to learn skills and to gain experience in any number of things. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with Chris Kilworth. Check out his podcast, Between the Mountains, and let us know in the Champion Stepdad Facebook group, what are those adventures that you like going on? Show some pictures and share some stories of some weekend trips or even just an evening of activity, and let us know what you're doing to connect with your children through adventure. Hey, Chris Kilworth, thanks a lot for joining me on the Champion Stepdad podcast. Really excited to have you on to talk about your experiences, man. Thanks a lot for joining me.
Hey, thank you very much for inviting me. It was a privilege seeing the email come through. It was a response to the website, and I went, oh, here we go, spam again. And I read it, and I was like, oh wait, hold on.
Good thing you didn't just quick delete it.
Yeah. So
the thing that caught my eye was you do a podcast called Between the Mountains, and it's an adventure podcast. And I've been trying to mix up the conversations that I have on Champion Stepdad, because I know sometimes, like, I can't get it. Like, being a stepdad's tough, right? But like, what else can we talk about? Like, there's got to be good things, business or adventure or, hanging out with buddies. Like it doesn't always have to be so serious. And so when I saw your podcast pop up on some things I was scrolling through, I'm like, you know what? Yeah, that's a cool conversation I want to have. And it's funny because then when you and I talked, what I found out is that you are a stepdad. And so I'm like, oh, well, see, like it's just works out. So yeah, man, I'm really excited to talk about this. Let's jump right into what caught my attention. So you have a podcast called Between the Mountains. What do you talk about?
Hey, thank you very much. Yeah, Between the Mountains is an adventure podcast. Um, we talk about, we get adventurers on, usually the more experienced adventurers, because adventure is anything, like anything just slightly outside your comfort zone. So, you know, for my 6-year-old, it's camping the back garden. That's an adventure. For John Gupta, previous guest, his adventure is climbing K2. So, you know, it's all depends what's pushing your zone, right? So we usually get the people on who have done the jungle exploration and the mountain climbing. We explore what they do, their background, and we explore their mindset as well. So a different corner of the mindset that you explore. How do you deal with adversity? How do you deal when other people put their limitations on you? How do you process, when this thing went wrong, what was going through your mind? How did you get through that? So yeah, I love what I do, and I'm quite blessed to have such fantastic guests to come on.
So how did you get going starting that? I mean, you're right. Adventure means a lot of things to a lot of people. I love to travel. I love off-roading in my 4Runner. I've got a pop-up camper. We love just going and just seeing what we can see. But everybody has this different idea. What does adventure look like for you? What do you like to do?
It's good that I'm on this podcast because it's related to this podcast, which has made me have to shift slightly the goals of adventure. So I was a latecomer to adventure. I had all the right foundations laid in my childhood, and then never really I'd say, I don't know, discovered, is that the word? Travel? Discovered travel until 2017. And as I explored that, I went through road trips, and I still love road trips. But then I realized that, the adventure side of travel is really for me. It's not so much the culture and the food of Southeast Asia. It's getting to Thailand and then straight away going to their tallest mountain and seeing if I can get up it. It's landscapes for me. So recently, because through some turn of events, at least for now, I'm a single father 7 days a week with my daughter who's 6. So adventures had to take a slightly different shift of approach for me, which is mainly just getting out for hikes in the UK mountains here, and getting out and just doing anything that's pushing the boundaries. So we went even small things. The kind of, I guess what I do now is more like living adventurously. So rather than having big projects at the moment and then shooting for them, it's more living adventurously. So little things like when we went to the children's zoo, next to it was kind of like a high ropes course for kids. So we just spontaneously went and paid for the harnesses and then got on it and had a little explore. So anything from mountains to just your random ad hoc things that push the boundaries of what we can do. So.
And that's a great point, because a lot of people think about adventure and they're like, I got to sell the house and go travel the world. And it really doesn't have to be like that. I mean,
no,
there's
always.
Nothing wrong with the weekend warrior mentality, or, people like me.
Micro adventures, it's called.
Yeah, little micro adventures. Yeah. Like, why am I not going to head, 10 minutes down the road? I mean, I live in Phoenix, which is southwest of US, and it's primarily desert landscape, but that means there's also a lot of awesome adventure opportunities, especially me living so far northwest. So I'm literally on the outskirts of the Phoenix metro. So, I drive 10 minutes, I'm out of town and I'm at the base of a mountain and I'm driving up and, we're doing some cool stuff. But yeah, the idea that it's easy to get kind of caught in the busyness of life. So what is it, something that you can do for a half-day adventure, whether it be the zoo in the middle of town or bumping right out of town, wherever it is, everywhere you live. I used to live in Nebraska, which is the middle of the United States, and anybody that lives in the United States knows that's like flyover country. You don't go there for any reason. You either live there or you fly over it. But there's still stuff to do if you're willing to get out there and go find some things to do. You just got to be adventurous, right? Step outside your comfort zone and find some things. So, and you mentioned doing this with your daughter. And I know you guys had, it was either an episode of the podcast or it was an article that you'd post, or a blog post or something like that. Obviously you were talking about at a young age, you took her hiking up this minor mountain, right? So how did you get going with her, and how did she handle that?
We had a August last year when she was 5. I took her on a kind of an adventure 3-day holiday mini breakaway. Um, so we did her first mountains, her first waterfalls, and her first caves in the national park here in the UK called the Brecon Beacons National Park. And this mountain is a whopping, like sit back in your seats, ladies and gentlemen. It's 886 meters.
All right.
That's it.
Okay.
So that's like, oh Christ, what's that? A very small amount of feet.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get the American.
Yeah, I'm trying to do the conversion. I'm like, that's a half mile. It's I don't know. Like it's not like, you know, something that you would see in National Geographic. Let's just say that.
Yeah. You're not going to see sort of ice axe crampons roped up, high blizzards documentaries up there. But the weather is quite formidable. And actually, her first day, the route to that mountain. What's different about the UK is pretty much every mountain you do, you're going to do the entire ascent. So we went into this trip. She's called Penny. This mountain is called Penny Fan. So I thought that's kind of a cool one to take her up. So we go up the first one, Vanna Big, and then we go back down again, and then we go up Cribbin, and then back down again, and then up Penavan. And she did it all herself, all the ascent herself. I refused to pick her up until we got to the top of Penavan. It was in about 50-mile-an-hour winds, but gorgeous sunny day. Yeah, it was an incredible day out, and yeah, just communicated with her basically, because every time she started to get a bit frightful, it was only really because it was unusual, not because there was any immediate risk. So it was just chatting her through, giving her all the tools that she needs to use, and then letting her choose if she's going to use them or not. She's only 5, so if she wanted to turn back, she could turn back, but. Same thing with the waterfalls. The next day we went with there's 4 waterfalls in this trail, and the last one you can walk behind, and I'd been there before, and it was like a little trickle coming out, and I was thinking, yeah, I'll go back there with Penny, and apparently it had rained a lot because I went back there and it was gushing out the top, and there was a big queue to walk behind, and we went behind it. We got totally drenched. I got a lovely photo on my GoPro of me looking like big smiles, and she just looked shocked. but yeah, and then the next day we went into caves and just had a little exploration and looked at these sort of underground waterfalls coming through the caves, and the artwork that they found there from many generations ago. And yeah, that was the start of getting into the bigger outdoors with her, really.
So what's the plan now? Do you have anything specific in mind? Like, what's the next step, or do you have a major adventure travel? Like, what's on the agenda now that you've got her out getting and doing some things?
Well, as far as being a dad and doing stuff with Penny goes, there's quite a few. There's always a big list of stuff I want to do, but I want to take her up the UK's biggest mountain. Which is, again, only 1,345 meters. I think it's just over 3,000 feet. So it's not huge, but you start at 70 meters. And I want to take her up that, because then she would have done what we call the National Three Peaks here in the UK, which is the biggest mountain in Scotland, biggest one in England, biggest one in Wales. So it'd be awesome to take her up that. But Scotland's a long way away from where I am. So I'm planning the next thing I really want to do with her. It's like a road trip with her. So head up, stop at some of the national parks on the way to Scotland, then get to the top of Scotland, and then come back down. And the next big thing I've got planned is in April, we're going to go to Norway, and we're going to try out some skiing for the first time, because we did a dry slope for half an hour and she loved it.
That's awesome.
So yeah, well, I've got some friends out in Norway. So now that restrictions are lifted a bit more, we're going to get some plane tickets. Well, we've got the plane tickets, and we're going to head out and do some skiing. And that's the more immediate, bigger stuff I've got planned. The little stuff just comes by.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're talking about just doing it as it comes available. And I like that idea that, yeah, you went to the zoo and we happened to saw that ropes course and we just decided to do it, because sometimes you get so focused on, this is the thing that we're doing. We're going to go and we're going to do the thing, and then we're going to go home. And then sometimes you miss those opportunities of take a step back and just enjoy it for what it is. It doesn't, and that's something that Cindy, my wife, has really been working on with me. So I come from a very, now I wouldn't even call it a structure, just like an aggressive house. I remember being a kid and everything was just always a conflict, right? There was always problems. And I remember traveling with my mom and dad was always just such a chore. Like everything was just everything was aggressive and conflict. And I just remember, like, every time we go to the zoo, like, it wasn't even really that much fun. Like, it was cool and all, but, you know, just as much as I remember, oh, cool, the bears and the tigers and my mom and dad are fighting. Like, you know, that was like my childhood. I'm like, yeah, mom and dad are fighting again. And, you know, it takes away so much of the opportunity. And I think that's what we're talking about here is, it doesn't have to be a planned event. And even recently, and that was my point, not to bash my parents, but to bring awareness to myself that even, so, you know, 4th of July here in the United States is a pretty big deal. So in the summer, we go to this big fireworks and big party at one of the baseball fields, like minor league baseball fields. It was a pretty big event. And for some reason, I didn't realize this. Cindy called me out. She's like, you know, when we go to these big events, you're always so tense. Like, you become uber planning and you're super tense, and you don't give grace, and you talk about all these mental skills and you're not using it. I'm like, oh man, like, see, I need a partner like that, like, you're not going to put me down, but you're going to call me out and hold me accountable for, you know what, this is not as enjoyable as it could be because you're so tense. Why are you so tense when we go to these big events? And I'm like, I don't 100%. Know. I don't know. So let me work on that. So having that mentality of going into enjoy the event, not just going to do the thing, but to enjoy it as an event from start to finish, and to bring it back. Like, parking doesn't have to be a big deal. Where are we going to eat doesn't have to be a big deal. Okay, so we take the easy road and maybe we spend a little bit more money. Like, I have the capability to do that now at a time in my life where a lot of previous times in my life, I didn't have that capability. So if I spend, you know, $20, $30, $40 more than I thought, okay, is it really that big of a deal? I'm more concerned about the enjoyment with the people that I'm with, enjoying the activity that we're doing. So bring it down a little bit. Like, it doesn't always have to be conflict. And so even something I didn't realize I was causing that much stress to other people. And so that's something that I've been working on recently, and it has provided me an opportunity to enjoy things in a different way than I had previously. And I didn't even realize it. So I think that's a really good perspective, and just bringing it down. Like, whatever is, because we all have our things that we need to work on. And there's nothing wrong with taking a step back and listening to people and saying, yeah, you know what, you're right. I'm causing this problem. And I tell people all the time, the number one thing that you have to do if you want to make something better is figure out what you're doing that's taking away from it, right? Because you can influence a lot of things, but you can control very few things. And most of the things you can control, actually, I'll say all the things you can control are inside of you. So that's something I've really been working on. And to hear somebody like you talk about using these opportunities to go out and enjoy the time with your daughters is amazing. And you're providing her great opportunities. And the fact that you're providing her the opportunity to explore. You know, you kind of alluded to the fact of, well, I'll let her make her decision. I'm going to encourage her and I'm going to teach her, but she can say we're done if she wants to and be done. But you made her walk on her own. She had to decide she wanted to do it. And I think those are all great things, because sometimes we don't give kids credit we either don't give kids credit for what they're capable of doing, or we're overcritical, expecting them to be something at a higher age developmentally than they really are. So I feel like a couple things I wanted to point out that I pulled from what you said that I thought was really cool, just as a dad, giving you kudos for doing some really cool things.
I appreciate it. But you touched on a good point there. Actually, those two things are linked. That, you know, kind of calling it, you know, looking at your inner demons. I am constantly trying to balance them and constantly keeping them in check with doing adventure with Penny. You know, two examples is one that we spoke about this a couple of weeks ago when we had our sort of pre-chat. I told her off in karate, so I've got to do in karate now. I've said you can start whatever hobbies you want and drop them when you feel right, but with karate we stick with it because it's self-defense, it's good mindset, it's good discipline. But she was basically she did a couple of things. Like she couldn't get her little sparring gear on, and then she asked for help. And then she pushed me away whilst also asking for help. And then she got a bit rude at me and I got a bit snappy back. And And actually, long story short, I basically realized that I did that when I was a kid. And although I was annoyed at the disrespect she was showing, I was also annoyed because she was doing what I had done as a kid. And I didn't like that I did that as a kid. So I kind of just took a step back. And then I was thinking, oh, actually, this is actually, mostly me going on. So let's sort it out. But equally, in wanting to push her to do more adventure and to explore, and she could be, she could absolutely love sumo wrestling, and we won't know unless she does sumo wrestling, and she can do it and she can hate it and no worries, but she might do it and fall in love with it, and then we'll stop at the cake store on the way back and get 5 and get her ready for it. But she, she's got to try these things to discover. And a part of the reason I do that is coming from my own childhood, where I was kind of like a wussy kid a lot of the time. And I really wish in hindsight I'd done more. So I'm constantly trying to find the balance and just check, am I getting her to do this because I'm trying to almost rewrite my childhood, or am I getting her to do this because it's great for her? And I'm constantly paranoid of wondering if my past affects how I'm parenting, and just trying to keep an eye on it, basically.
Yeah. Well, and we know the short answer is yes. Like everything we've experienced influences who we are and how we bring that out. I mean, I've raised 3 kids into their 20s, and now I'm in a relationship with somebody who has a 7 and a 9-year-old, and I'm making all the same mistakes over again. I'm just doing them in a different way. So I fixed this problem, and I think maybe that was the mindset that I was bringing into it is I don't want to do that again. And I use this a lot in like sport mental performance. It's like telling a baseball pitcher, don't throw high and outside. And then you tell them all the things that you want them to do. That's wrong, because now all they're thinking about is don't throw high and outside, don't throw high and outside. What are they going to do? They're probably going to throw high and outside. That's proven in mental skills training. And so for me, using that mental skills training for me as a dad, for the longest time, I've been focused on all these things that I didn't want to do, and all the things that I hated about my parents and the way that they raised me. And now, even though I didn't like it and I didn't want to do it, I'm doing it because that's all I ever focused on. And I just didn't realize it. Or I'm just making different mistakes because I didn't make a plan for, this is what I want. All I was focused on is what I didn't want to do. So it's even if I was able to avoid those mistakes, I was just making different mistakes. And it's not about being perfect. It's not about being the perfect parent, because it's never going to happen. But I think that we using that analogy of sport performance, mental performance, is stop telling yourself what you don't want to do and start telling yourself what you want to do. What kind of person do you want to be? What kind of parent do you want to be? And what are the behaviors that are reflective of the parent that you want to be? Then go and do those behaviors, and stop thinking about the things that you don't want to do, because you're going to be so busy doing the productive behaviors to become the parent that you want to be.
I mean, when you think about it in the basic levels, when you're running, cycling, skiing, you look where you want to go. You don't look where you don't want to go. Otherwise, you're going to crash. Skiing, for instance, if you look at that little 5-year-old child skiing up ahead of you and you go, oh, really, really don't want to hit them, and you start to panic and you just keep looking at that little child, you're going to like sideline her. Just take a child out on the mountain. But if you think, right, hazard here, hazard there, I want to take this line, and you just stay focused on that line, you'll do it. So spot on. You look where you want to go, not where you don't want to go.
My riding mentor, he used a lot of analogies from when I was a mountain biker. Like, he's like, stop looking at where you're at. He's like, you're going to crash because you're not seeing where you're going. He's like, you have to look down the road. And it's even more concerning when you're on a 2-wheeled vehicle as opposed to driving a car, because you don't have that stability. It's even more important to have that vision of where you're going. And those are all great analogies of, bringing that into parenting, of stop talking about what you don't want to do and start focusing on what you want to do, starting with what do I want to look like as a person, as a man, as a spouse, as a father, a business leader, or whatever profession you do or activities you do. Identify the type of person, no different than how a business person has a vision and mission for their business, so that they grow it into something intentional. Be intentional about who you want to be, and then decide the behaviors that support that. And then there's less emphasis on, and you don't have to worry so much about, oh, I don't want to do that. Okay, well, don't worry about that because you're so focused on what you want to do. There was something else that you were talking about that and it skips me, but that's I told you this is going to happen. Like where the conversation goes. So let's talk for a minute about self-care. Like, because you're a dad, and I get it. You want to be a great dad. You want to raise your daughter. What about self-care? What about you? What are you trying to accomplish as far as like adventure and stuff that you want to do for you?
Oh, as far as adventure goes, I really want to get into some more kind of gnarly winter hikes. I went up Ben Nevis in Scotland in a storm, and basically I chose the dates months before, and then obviously you can't tell when a storm is going to come, So we chose the dates, me and my friend, and the weather forecast is coming through, and it's looking a bit stormy. We're checking the forecast, and every day the windage is going up in miles per hour. And we decided to, knowing that we work really well as a team, we know each other since we were 2 or 3 years old, so we communicate very well. And we're very honest. So we knew if we had to turn back, we would. And I researched the route. I was watching videos that the vlogs people would put up on YouTube, not watching it for what they were talking about, like their meal or the view or anything, looking at it to try and catch what the route looked like on the videos. We mitigated so much risk and went for it. And we managed to reach the top just at the start of a storm. We got back to the car before the official weather warning kicked in. And that was one of the rules we had in place, was we wanted to be back at the car before it officially kicked in. But we had some pretty high winds, some pretty good snow. And that's really, like, there was no steep drop-offs anywhere near us. It was really great fun. But I also want to get on some lovely snow bluebird days. That's in the more immediate moment. Long term, I'm doing my first big mountain next year. I'm doing a mountain called Mount Kazbek in Georgia, which is 5,000 odd meters, just over. So looking forward to getting on a glacier for the first time and getting that sort of stuff done. But I mean, as far as self-care, I actually do, because obviously having Penny 7 days a week here, I live at home with my mum at the moment, and it's unfair to constantly expect, it's unfair on all three of us, I think, to expect her to keep looking after Penny on weekends, to leave Penny on weekends, and to in the short term give me the pleasure of getting outdoors, but then on the long term hate myself for being a bad parent. It's unfair on all three of us. So there's loads of things I could be doing further afield in the mountains in the UK, but instead I find the self-care and solace in doing karate with Penny. But I also do something called airsoft, which is it's like paintballing but with BB guns, and it's basically just a sounds like my childhood.
Like, yeah, everybody's making a big deal out of shooting everybody with BB guns. We're like, we used to do that all the time. We just didn't have the protective gear.
Yeah, but honestly, it's amazing. So, I mean, as far as activities goes, that's what they are. But I mean, airsoft is amazing because essentially you are an adult shooting other adults with a toy gun, pretending to be a soldier, and it's just the best. And then more kind of routine based is I'm just starting to up my running again and up my gym time again. You just need to give your head the best chance possible at fighting those inner demons and remaining focused. Try and get to bed on time, but I mean, that doesn't always go to plan. But yeah, self-care wise, it's more immediately it's karate and airsoft as a hobby, and gym and running as a looking after the brain.
Nice. Well, yeah. And I know when we talked before, and I tell people all the time, if there's ever a topic that is kind of skirting that edge, and I don't want to try to push into anything, but I do know that as a dad, as men and as dads and stepdads, there's power in community. Number one, because sometimes it's just comforting to know that other people are facing the same shit that we are. And you're like, you know what? Okay, I'm not the only one. And then to be able to hear people's stories and to understand that, what other people are going through. Maybe it's, I don't know what the right words are, without minimizing the experiences that people have, that, maybe it can bring it down a little bit. Like, okay, maybe what I'm facing isn't quite so difficult. So I did want to ask you for one or two questions about your experience with the how you got to be a single parent, and I want to kind of let you lead this conversation, because I know there's some touchy areas and we got into it intentionally off the mic.
Yes.
But I think it's important to have these conversations because there might be somebody out there who is struggling through something similar that you went to. So what are some of the points of the story that you wouldn't mind sharing?
Well, becoming a single father, first of all, one of the hardest decisions I've had to make, not because of the woman, but because of the kids. And actually that they became the reason I did it. So at the time I was a stepdad at the time. Yeah. I met a boy called Elijah, amazing kid. And he met him when he was 2.5 and remained his stepdad until about 6. So yeah, huge compassion for what you do, and anyone listening to this who's a stepdad. That it's next level to welcome someone else's child into your life as if they're your own, as close as it can be. But actually, yeah, like I said, the kids ended up being the reason. So if you could paint your typical toxic relationship, then that's pretty much what I had. Everyone's different in different ways, more severe, less severe. But essentially, I realized that the reason I was still with the mother, the first reason, second reason, third reason was because of the kids. And I kind of woke up one day and I was thinking, you know what, that's not a reason to stay with someone. That's unfair on her. It's unfair on me. And it's unfair on the kids. And as much as you like to think, statistically, kids in a complete family unit are better. But then if you look at the individual, our house was like, there's arguments, like multiple times a week. And it wasn't fab. So because it was my first reasons for staying with the woman was the kids, that was my wake up call for me. I tried for a very long time, and I'm sure she'd argue the same. Tried for a very long time to sort of fix things in the relationship. But yeah, waking up and realizing actually I'm only doing this because the kids are involved, was a wake up call for me, and actually best decision I've ever made, because I made that decision. First of all, you spoke about other people going through the similar thing. Leaving that relationship, I started regular and still do regular therapy, sort of counseling sessions. The first thing I did, the doctor recommended going to group therapy, and all the stigma of group therapy, everything you see in the films, like all the stupid sketches. And I was thinking, oh, really? Like group therapy? Can you not just give me a counselor? And they're like, no, sorry, the funding's in there. And I was like, fuck. So yeah, went off to it. Obviously, as you can imagine, really low. And I sat there and they said, okay, when you're thinking these things, what's one thing that goes through your mind? And I didn't pipe up. No one piped up for a little bit. And then someone just said, what's the point? And I was like, hold on, that's what I think. And then another woman went, oh yeah, me too. I just keep asking, what's the point? What's the point? And then I was like, damn, like other people feel the same way. And yeah, that was that was like my first lesson, like in realizing that, like you said, community is really important.
Yeah, but actually there's something powerful in hearing somebody else say something that you're uncomfortable admitting, because if you say it out loud now, like other people have heard it, even if you say it to yourself out loud, there's something really powerful about whether it be say it out loud, write it down. And I say all the time, the purpose of this podcast is not for me to shout from the mountains about how great I am and tell everybody how to be a great stepdad. This is about me and my growth and me trying to share my story and hoping that I build community within it. And yeah, there's something powerful about just speaking out loud and admitting something and to hear somebody else say it in that environment, it must have been really amazing.
Yeah. And then the other point was, leaving, it was the best decision I ever made, for Penny, if anything, because It was one of those relationships where, and just to give complete, try and remain as unbiased as possible on a public format here. In my opinion, it was certainly, their way or the highway. Whereas by leaving the relationship, Penny didn't have to grow up listening to the arguments and the passive aggressiveness nows. And instead, for when I had Penny for my time, I could parent my way and I could do what I wanted to do. The times where I'd say, let's get out and just do something for free, like go walking or go camping, would get vetoed before. Whereas now we can go do that. And she's always asking me all the time, to the point where it's just like beginning to get annoying. Can we camp in the garden? And I'm like, Penny, it's a Wednesday, it's school tomorrow. And and so that was like the first thing. That was fantastic. But also, leaving it with the plan of long term, because the other thing to consider there was, and I'm sure other people who may maybe listen to this might have had similar experiences. I know you unfortunately did. But leaving that relationship, one day just came along and I was completely cut off from the stepson. Wasn't allowed to interact with him, wasn't allowed to see him. And so really thankful that I left it implementing the long-term approach to everything. Long-term everything. I'm not looking for short-term wins. I'm looking for long-term gains. And the thing that helped me in regards to the stepson was knowing that worst case scenario, I cannot see him or talk to him for years, but when he's older, he'll probably have questions and he'll come talking to me. And then moving on to Penny, the long-term plan there was just doing what I had to do to ensure that in a decade's time, she's going to be comfortable and feel safe and secure. And knowing that and aiming for that, the more immediate effect is that she's probably going to start feeling that now. So yeah, really left with that. And it's probably one of the best things if you're looking for me to share my experience in case other people in the same shoes. If you're finding that your first reason is the kids in the relationship, it's unfair on everyone, including yourself. And you need to get away and start being your own parent rather than a dictated parent.
Yeah, and there's I try to be careful because there is no one right answer for whether you're talking about how to be a man, how to be a dad, how to be a stepdad, how to be in a relationship. I just know that from my experience, when people say relationship is work, and you just got to expect, it's going to be work and there's going to be struggle. I understand the point, right? Because you don't want to walk away just because things can be difficult. I also had a lot of assumptions about relationships based on how I was raised, the environments that I was raised, not just with my parents, but with a lot of the people that I knew that were in my general environment. I just assumed that that's just what people did. People yelled at each other a lot, and
then you get other people telling you that it's work, and so you look at it in your own home and you're thinking, well, they're just saying it's work, so I'm guessing that's just what's happening here.
Yep. And I saw people argue and fight, and so I assumed I got to stand my ground and I got to argue and fight, even if it's really not that big of a deal, and argument and fighting turn into a toxic relationship. And you're right. Like at some point there has to be accountability. Because if this is going to get better, I can only focus on me, and I hate the idea of, well, relationships are 50-50. Sorry, I'm knocking stuff off my desk. I talk with my hands a lot. So, the idea of relationships are 50-50 is bullshit, because that just, if nothing else, that's just an out for you, because you're like, look, I'm giving my 50%. They're only giving 40%. No, you're either 100% in or you're not. If you're 99% in, why can't you give that extra 100%? Going back to the sports psychology reference, if you're talking to an athlete, that's the kind of verbiage that we use, right? What are you doing to be more mentally into your competition or your preparation? Why can't that apply to guys in their relationships? And so the first thing is, what can you do to focus on you to make the relationship better? And if you really have tried, and and I did the therapy, we did the separation, I went on deployments for 4 to 6 months. We tried a lot of things. And when I finally walked in the door one day and I looked at her and I said, I'm done. It was almost humorous when she looked at me, she goes, "Oh, you're giving up?" And I'm like, Like
Are you kidding me?
Everybody sees it except for us. And I finally saw it. I finally had the realization
Yeah.
After it was after a deployment. I came back and I'm like, you know what? I'm going to give it one more go. I am jumping into this thing and I am going to do everything in my power. And I still fell short. I still made mistakes. I am responsible for my portion of the failed relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I had to step out and say, this is not at all working, you know? And then of course I looked back at it and there were red flags all over the place. The relationship shouldn't happen in the first place, but it did. So I have to learn from that and go from that and just try to be better from this point forward. But it was almost humorous when she looked at me and she goes, "Oh, you're giving up. You're walking away." And I'm like, "Yep, I have to."
Just like, you know what? Just screw everything.
I was like, done. I finally see what everybody else has been seeing for 10 years. Like, this is just there's nothing good about this.
It's weird, isn't it? That moment that different lens is on. You have that paradigm shift. And they do the same actions they've been doing the whole time, and you suddenly see it in a different light, and you're like, "Oh wow, yeah, okay."
and as bad as the relationship was, as toxic as the relationship was, I still felt like a failure. I didn't want to tell people that I was leaving, you know. And then of course the fallout from that, as a toxic relationship goes, the whole fallout from that was all kinds of rumors and suggestions of you know all the things that I had done wrong, which you know the majority are wrong, just outright false. But you know, again, that's just reflection of the relationship we were in. Why would I expect it to be anything different when the relationship ended? You know, when you're in a relationship with a toxic person, they suddenly don't become less toxic because you decided to leave them. Like if anything, it becomes worse.
I get that. I've got the same thing with the situation I'm in. You know, not to give too many details because it's still ongoing and unfair. But certainly, I sit there frustrated sometimes, going, God, I wish. Like, why can't this just happen? And then I sit back and I'm like, God, if that were to happen, like, I wouldn't be in this situation. Like, what am I expecting to happen? Yeah. You know, like, so I don't know why I'm surprised. But,
well, and I know that you have the situation very similar to what I went through in that when my relationship ended, I was stepfather to a stepson who I had met when he was 3 years old. I left the relationship when he was 16. So I was heavily invested. I was very good friends with his dad. Him and I, we co-parented really well together. We considered going into business together. He had asked me to be assistant coach on some sports teams, you know, because I just had a good relationship with my stepson and we just clicked, you know, and it was very refreshing to have a good friendship relationship with his dad. So because he greatly benefited from that. And you know, a very unfortunate situation that prior to the relationship failing, his dad passed away in a car accident. So now is a situation where he lost his biological dad, and then his mom said, "You're not allowed to have a relationship with your stepdad." And so he was basically left with nobody. And so from 16 on, I was told, don't contact him or I'm going to press charges is essentially what I was told. And I'm like, okay, you know, I saw him when I could see him because I went to some of his sports stuff, but it got to the point where it was so, there were so many threats and so many allegations. I'm like, I'm just going to separate myself from the situation. And, you know, the people that were kind of in the friends circle, they weren't really friends. They were more like acquaintances. That's what I'm looking for. Acquaintances because of sports and other activities. All that went away. I was basically pushed away by so many people, found out who my real friends were, which was probably a blessing in disguise. But Absolutely. You know, same situation. Everybody just kept telling me, you know, be patient. You are so heavily invested in him. You had such a good relationship. Give him the opportunity when he's ready,
the long-term
when he's an adult. And of course, you know, lives in Nebraska for some stupid fucking reason. You have to be 19 to be considered an adult, where everybody else is at least, you know, is 18 or younger. I don't know why you got to be 19 in Nebraska. It's stupid. So anyway, he turned 19 in early in the year. And then I know he was driving back from his hockey season on the East Coast. And he just called me one day. He's like, hey, I'm looking for this thing. You know, he was looking for something specific that I had. And I'm like, well, yeah, you know, I'll see what I can do. I'll find that for you. Oh, by the way, how are you doing? And just like that, we clicked into a 30-minute conversation. And now it's the point where I call him sometimes weekly, at least every other week on Sunday. And so now we're in this routine of talking to each other. So,
That's
you know,
fantastic.
being in that situation it's, I kind of went into a long story, but just the idea that, you know, sometimes you can only control what you can control. And if it's not within your control, you have to let it go. And in your case, similar to mine, just the hope that maybe down the road, something will work out in your favor.
Yeah.
In my case, it was a huge blessing, because I feel like I was missing something from my life for so long after, you know, 13 years
being so invested. Yeah.
I was heavily in, and I still am.
You know, that kind of brings it around full circle, which is that, you know, it presents itself in many different scenarios with different decisions happening, but the kid always comes first. Your stepchild, your biological child, whatever they need always comes first. Whatever's the best thing is for them, and you should never have been cut contact. The decision should have come, if it was going to happen, from the son to say, hey, you know, I don't want to, don't want to pursue that anymore. And that just goes through with absolutely everything. The kid comes first. And weirdly, you know, I can't remember the last time I gave Penny a timeout, but through frustrating moments in the house, I've given myself timeouts recently. And that is the best thing for the child, you know, not to give her a timeout, because essentially I'm the leader in that situation, aren't I? So anything that happens falls on my shoulders. So if she's going to kick off more and get worse, what am I going to do? Step back and turn to other adults and go, oh yeah, it's her fault, the 6-year-old. You know, right. Yeah, you know, the kids need always comes first, because they're the ones still growing and developing, discovering. And yeah, that decision shouldn't have ever been made to cut contact.
Well, I think it just shows the
should always be, you know what, we really don't like you because you gave up.
Yeah, right. You know, a toxic person doesn't become less toxic after the relationship ends. But, you know, I think that was the thing I was trying to think of earlier, that and I'm glad you brought this up. And I'm not going to go into a long thing about it, because we're pushing time and I want to be respectful. I know it's getting late over there. But the idea that I've been jumping into recently is, when you try to talk about breaking habits, things that I didn't appreciate when I was young, or a young parent, that I realized that I was doing that I didn't like when I was a kid. And you talk about, well, I want to have a good relationship with my kids. And, you know, now I'm talking about my 2 stepsons. I want to have a good relationship with them. I want to raise them more productively than I did my own kids. I don't want to fix any mistakes. Like, you can't do that, right? I can try to reconnect with my adult children now, and try to build a relationship as we are now. I can't fix what happened when they were 12, 15, whatever, when they were younger. Like, it happened, and they probably have a lot of the same feelings about me as when, you know, I have about my parents raising me, because I made a lot of the same mistakes. So now I have this opportunity to kind of readjust and create this new vision of what it means for me to be a good parent, right? The good parent, or, you know, to be an effective parent. Because the goal here is, and I get into so heated conversations so many times, that I don't want obedient kids. And people are like, well, that's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. No, I don't want obedient kids.
You're not meant to make them into robots.
Yeah. When I was a kid, if you spoke up, man, you got your ass beat with a belt, you got smacked, you got shit taken away from you. You got your stuff broken. Like, that's the kind of house I was raised in. And it was so counterproductive, because sure. Okay. So there were times where I would think twice about my actions, but it didn't make me stop the things. I was just smarter in the way that I did them. I hid more stuff from my parents. Yeah. And not only did I hide more from my parents, but that also meant that there was a huge barrier between us. So when I was stressed, when I was facing trouble at school, when I was facing just trying to figure out my life,
Yeah.
I had no ambition
Like, puberty
whatsoever
especially
to
is
have
mad.
conversations with my parents.
Yeah.
Zero interest. Even to this day, I do not call my parents for advice. I don't call my parents to talk to them about stuff. In fact, the last time my mom called me, she was asking me about some political stuff, and she said some stuff that I thought was inappropriate, and I called her out on it. She hung up on me, and I haven't talked to her in 2 weeks. So
Amazing.
I mean, again, you talk about toxic. Sometimes toxic people don't change. So if I raise my kids with a heavy hand, if I try to do that with my stepkids, what am I trying to accomplish here? Right?
Yeah.
I want to support and encourage my kids. I want to, and I'm going to say this over and over again. I'll say this to the day I die. I want to separate punishment and discipline, because people say, what's the number one thing? And I've done this poll on numerous Facebook groups for dads, stepdads, men in general. I'm like, what's the number one issue you face as a stepdad? What's the number one issue you face as a parent? And the number one by far is discipline. And the number one, my number one response to that is, well, do you separate discipline and punishment? And most people get into argument with me that, oh, well, that's the same thing. No, I'm the parent. They need to do what they're told. No, the difference between discipline and punishment, discipline is to teach. Punishment is to add responsibility or take away freedoms, right? So if you have the ability to separate those, you now have more empathy about developmental appropriate education and trying to connect with your kids. So even when the 7-year-old stepson who gets hangry and suddenly has an attitude and talks back to his mom, and which is my number one trigger, even Cindy will tell me, just give him a break. Like, he's hungry. And my first reaction is, no, he can't talk to you that way. And she's like, is it really that big of a deal? Just tell
I'm
him
the same way. I'm trying to remind myself at the moment, like,
yeah,
and actually you mentioned that. So we've got a gold star chart running at the moment. It's on a whiteboard so we can refresh it. And similar to what we were talking about 2 weeks ago, I get her to get involved. I go, all right, so what are some things at the moment that you don't think you're doing very well that you think you should be better at or want to be better at? So we talk it through. Rule number 5, I very keenly added at the moment, which is no interrupting, because she keeps sparking up. And then when you're going, hold on, I'll get to you, she gets upset. So we're working on that one. But one of them, and it will be on there till we stop doing gold star charts, is communicate. And that's twofold. When I say communicate, the first thing you're probably thinking is just talk to me. It's, tell me how you're feeling, keep up to me. If you're feeling great, tell me why. If you're feeling sad, tell me why. Especially with the stuff going on at the moment. But the second part of that is, and I talk her through this so she knows, is yes, do as you're told. Do as you're asked. Sorry, not told, asked. I think there's a big difference there. But also, she knows that if she has a different idea, if she has a different plan, then certainly stop in the immediate moment. Because if she might be doing something which is, maybe a bit dangerous, climbing the banister on the stairs, for instance, don't, carry on. Certainly stop there. But then communicate with me. Go, actually, what I was trying to do was get up to here so I could slide back down. And then we can talk it out. We can figure it out. So it's not get down there and don't you dare even mention anything to me because you're in trouble now. It's encouraging her to communicate, because certainly do as you're asked. But if you think you've got a better idea and a better plan, tell me about it. Because if it's better, I'll do it. So, yeah. Or if I've misunderstood, tell me. And I'll be like, right, okay, right, gotcha. You're now not in trouble.
Well, that's what I've been trying to work with Mason Jackson on is I don't have an issue with you disagreeing with me. What I have an issue with is how you disagree with me. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about what's the appropriate way to tell me that you're frustrated, because there's nothing wrong with being frustrated and mad. Clearly, that happens to me. And so let's talk about when you're frustrated and mad, or what got you to that point, right? How do we work through those things? It's not about stop doing that or I'm going to beat your ass. Like, that's not productive, and unless they're really, really doing something wrong. But even in that case, like, where's the learning opportunity? Because what's the goal here? Do you really want obedient kids?
The thing is, there are studies done. There are studies done that show that children that get smacked, as punishment, are more likely to grow up and be liars or larger liars than people who weren't smacked, because they have this
how to hide it.
Exactly. They're learning how am I going to avoid getting smacked? Because I'm a kid learning, I'm going to make mistakes. How am I going to avoid getting smacked? And just like we kind of moved from the cane in schools to just getting sort of smacked, spanked, I guess you call it in America, don't you? And now we're moving from that to just like, don't lay a finger on your kids, in my opinion, because I think, like your partner says, if they muck up, like in the grand scheme of things, like, does it matter that much? Like, no, teach them, but like usually when they muck up, it's not the end of the world. But also, you want them to do the right things for the right reasons, not for the wrong reasons. You want them to communicate with you. You want them to finish the dinner, not because they're going to get smacked with a wooden spoon if they don't finish their dinner, but because they know that even though I'm kind of feeling a bit full up, the broccoli here is going to make me stronger. And, like, I ran loads in school today, and I'm told that if I eat the chicken here, that's going to build some muscle. Stuff like that today. Today at the dinner table, she, the classic kid syndrome, had enough of her dinner, but had space for pudding. So I was like, no, there's no pudding. Like, you said, you're full up. There's no more space, right? And she's like, no. I can have a fruit, which is like a yogurt over here in America, in the UK. So I said, well, listen, the other day when you were ill, you didn't want any biscuits. You only wanted healthy food. So eating those peas is going to be good for you. Just finish those peas, and you can have whatever you want for pudding. And then she ended up having a mince pie. So, so she got an upgrade out of it. But yeah, that's a really long-winded way of saying, you want your kids to do things for the right reasons, not for the wrong reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Don't be so focused on the what, be focused on the why too.
Yeah. Well, and you've got that big argument of, we're getting too soft. And I think there was for a short period of time. And again, going to my education, because that's what I have to go from. The research that I've done is, there was a period of time where there was an overemphasis on self-esteem and self-confidence, like
eighth place medals.
Yeah. And you build self-confidence by, oh, you're such a good kid. Right. And what we're realizing is we had good intention. People had good intention. We just went about it the wrong way, because you don't build self-confidence by saying, oh, you're such a good kid, or you're so smart, or here's a medal for participating. No, that's not how you do it. What you do is you build self-confidence by encouraging good behavior, by encouraging effort, by encouraging participation, communication, right? Those kind of things. But it's the kind of stuff that you have to build. If you want to have you want to have a strong bond with your children, if you want to build an environment where they don't feel threatened for making a mistake, right? They don't feel like they're going to get their head lopped off for maybe making a mistake, even if it's deliberate. Hey, they got caught lying. Okay, so what's the result? Well, they're going to lose their. What's the biggest impact? Because when I was a kid, it got to the point where here's my mom's beating my ass again. Whatever, I'll be outside 5 minutes. My ass is going to hurt for a half hour, and then I'll be fine. Did that stop me from doing those things?
Nope.
No. But what did it do? It created a massive barrier between my mom and me.
A huge chasm.
That lingered for years. That still lingers. So I want to go back to, what's the point of what you're trying to accomplish? If you're just blindly doing shit because it's what you've always done, what's the reason behind it? And if you have a good reason for what you do and you think that it works, then keep doing your thing, but make sure that you take a solid effort at not just defending your actions, but actually take a look at, what is the result? What are you actually accomplishing versus what you're trying to accomplish? And I think that most parents are going to say, I would love to have I want a great, solid, I want good communication. I want to be emotionally attached. I want them to come to me when they have problems. They're not going to do that if your first reaction is to yell and beat their ass.
Yes, exactly.
It's not going to happen.
Your goal as a parent and as a stepfather should be to teach them how to be good, so that when they become adults, you've given them the best shot they've got. And
you focus on behaviors.
The way you're going to do that is by being there for them. And you're not going to... Like your toxic relationship, they can't say that they're going to be there for you and they're here for you whilst also like beating your ass. You've hit the nail on the head. And so that's we're coming up on a little bit over what we said we were going to do. I really appreciate your time.
again, the reason why it caught my attention to contact you is the Between the Mountains podcast, which just like mine, all I got to do is search for it, and they'll find it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. You got the website, which has not only links to your podcast, but it's got articles, it's got pictures of things that you've done, the great people that you've had a conversation with, and I think that, you know, and of course, you know, kudos and encouragement to you for to not only encourage adventure, but show your daughter the way, right? Because sometimes it's easy to sit back and say, well, I did all the things, like I signed them up and I took them to soccer practice. Did you take them and practice in the backyard? Do you teach them how to kick a ball? Did you actually go out and hike with them? Did you go for walks with, like, what are the opportunities to connect? Kids don't connect because they're provided toys and opportunity. No. They want to sit down and play a game with you. They want you to take them in the backyard and show them how to do whatever it is activity that they're interested in, or maybe show them something that you're interested in. But connection is built by doing things together. And I think it's really awesome, the things that you're doing and showing her, because I've always had that adventure bug. And I think it comes from my dad. Like, even though he wasn't that type where, you know, skiing or, you know, bike riding or climbing mountains, but he sure as shit would pack us all in a van with a pop-up camper and we'd hit the road for 2 weeks, you know?
Yeah, man.
And we'd just be where are we going? I don't know. We're going this way. Like, that's the kind of dad that my dad was. And, you know, of all the things that I could complain about, he did instill in me the sense of adventure that I have. And so I'm always grateful for that. But it wouldn't have existed if he wouldn't have led the way and provided us not only the opportunity, but then actually did it with us. Right. We did the things together. So it's really awesome, man. I really appreciate your time. Last thoughts, man. What do you got for us?
Last thoughts. I mean, a couple of thoughts that were just running through my mind just then. I mean, I guess we have got over that. So I told you, didn't I? Like that was more for me than for you, because I could talk to you for an hour before, then do an hour's podcast and chat for an hour afterwards, and still leave thinking, oh crap, I should have mentioned this. But I guess there's two things. One, in regards to adventure, is just trying to push her. Just try to get her to push her limits, whatever those limits are, whether they're tiny, because she's a tiny human, or, you know, quite big, you know, just trying to get her to push the boundaries. And I guess, you know, fear is probably one thing. And just really, really kind of just get her to just really understand that when she feels fear, that's her body saying, get ready. You're completely safe. You've got this harness on you. You're doing here. It's a short distance over there. It's not even that big a fall. You're not going to fall. You know, that stuff. But also as well, just, I guess, honesty. And like you were talking about just now, when you're being there for your kids, you're not awarding 8th place awards. You're being honest. And that means saying what you just did then was amazing. And I really appreciate you doing that. But that's also saying this thing right here, you know, you kind of sucked at. So let's do that a bit better next time. So
yeah, there's nothing wrong with a little honesty.
Exactly. As long as it comes from a place of love and they know why you're saying they were shit. You know, as long as they understand why you're saying it and how to be better, that's fine. But if you just say, Mom, that was crap, and then you actually swear in front of them, and, then that's not good. But like you say, although there are times where you have to work around your kids, being on your phone in the room with your kid is not the same. It is not being with your kid. Being with your kid is getting out and doing something inside the house, outside the house, is being with them and interacting with them. And that's part of the reason why we do adventure so much.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, man. And you said it first early on, adventure means a lot of different things to different people. So find something, push the boundary even just a little bit, and go find something that connects you with your kids, or like we talked about, some self-care. Get out there and do something for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome, man. Really appreciate your time today.
Oh, thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.